Sebastian Hale had everything: wealth, power, and a global empire. But when a car crash left him trapped and helpless, a mysterious boy saved his life, then vanished. Now, determined to find his young rescuer, Sebastian embarks on a journey that will change both their lives forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Sebastian Hale stared at the stack of papers on his mahogany desk. Another acquisition, another $1 billion. At 52, he had built Hale Industries into a global empire, but the victory felt hollow. His penthouse office overlooking the city skyline seemed emptier than usual tonight. "Mr. Hale, your car is waiting," his assistant Monica announced from the doorway. Sebastian nodded without looking up. "Thank you. You can go home now." "It's nearly midnight, sir. Are you sure you want to drive back to the estate yourself?" "The weather report says there's heavy rain coming." "I'll be fine," Sebastian replied, gathering his briefcase. "I need the time to think." Monica hesitated but knew better than to argue. In 15 years working for Sebastian Hale, she'd never seen him take advice about his personal safety. The elevator descended 80 floors to the underground parking garage, where his sleek black sports car waited. The engine purred to life, and Sebastian pulled out into the deserted streets. The first drops of rain began to hit the windshield as he left the city behind. The winding road to his countryside estate was familiar, too familiar. Sebastian barely noticed the increasing downpour or the way his headlights reflected off the wet asphalt. His mind was on tomorrow's board meeting, the new Asian markets, the numbers that kept growing while his satisfaction kept shrinking. He didn't see the fallen tree branch until it was too late. The car swerved violently. Sebastian jerked the wheel, but the tires lost their grip on the slick road. The world spun around him as the car tumbled down the steep embankment, metal screaming against rock and earth. When the movement stopped, Sebastian was upside down, still strapped in his seat, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead. Pain shot through his left leg. The smell of gasoline filled his nostrils. "Help!" he called weakly. But who would hear him on this remote road in the middle of a storm? Through the shattered window, rain poured in. Sebastian's vision began to blur, consciousness slipping away. "This is how it ends," he thought. "All the money, all the power, none of it matters now." Then he heard it, a sound outside the wreckage. Footsteps. "Hello? Is someone in there?" A child's voice, high and frightened. Sebastian forced his eyes open. "Here," he managed to say. "I'm trapped." A small face appeared at the window, eyes wide with concern. A boy, no older than 10, his clothes soaked, through brown hair plastered to his forehead. "Don't worry, mister, I'll help you," the boy said with surprising determination. "It's not safe," Sebastian warned. "The car might catch fire. Go find help." The boy shook his head. "There's no time. I can smell the gas." Before Sebastian could protest further, the boy was pulling at the jammed door, his thin arms straining against the crumpled metal. Somehow, using a fallen branch as leverage, he managed to create an opening. "Can you unbuckle your seatbelt?" the boy asked. Sebastian fumbled with the release, bracing himself as he fell awkwardly against the roof of the car. Pain shot through his injured leg, and he bit back a cry. "I'll help you crawl out," the boy said, reaching in with hands that were scratched and muddy. It seemed impossible that this child could drag a grown man from the wreckage, but the boy worked with a single-minded focus, pulling Sebastian inch by painful inch. When Sebastian's weight proved too much, the boy found a sturdy branch for him to grab onto. "Almost there, mister, just a little more." Finally, Sebastian lay on the wet grass several yards from the car, the rain washing blood from his face. The boy knelt beside him, his breathing heavy from exertion. "Thank you," Sebastian whispered. "What's your name?" But before the boy could answer, headlights appeared on the road above. Someone had spotted the broken guardrail. Voices called down the embankment. "Down here!" the boy shouted, waving his arms. Sebastian turned to look at his rescuer, but a wave of dizziness overcame him. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the boy backing away as paramedics rushed toward them. "Wait," Sebastian tried to say, but darkness claimed him. He woke 3 days later in a private hospital room, his leg in a cast, bandages around his ribs and head. Monica sat in a chair beside his bed, tapping on her tablet. "You're awake," she said, immediately pouring him a glass of water. "The doctors said you were lucky. The crash could have been fatal." Sebastian took a sip, his throat dry. "There was a boy," he said. "A child pulled me from the wreck." Monica nodded. "The paramedics mentioned something about that, but when they arrived there was no one else there." "Find him," Sebastian ordered, his voice stronger than he expected. "I need to thank him properly." "Sir, we don't have any information about this child. He disappeared before—" "Find him," Sebastian repeated. "Use the security team. Hire private investigators, whatever it takes. That boy saved my life." Over the next 2 weeks, as Sebastian recovered in the hospital, his team searched for the mysterious child. They examined traffic cameras, interviewed people in nearby neighborhoods, and finally discovered a lead. A local shopkeeper recalled a boy who matched the description, a child who sometimes came in to buy food with scrounged coins. By the time Sebastian was released from the hospital, they had a name: Liam Carter. The boy was an orphan, they learned. His parents had died in a house fire 3 years ago. With no relatives willing to take him in, he'd been placed in foster care but had run away multiple times. For the past 6 months, he'd been living in an abandoned building near the woods where Sebastian's accident occurred. "Take me there." Sebastian ordered his driver as soon as he was well enough to travel. The contrast between Sebastian's world and Liam's couldn't have been more stark. The abandoned building was once a small factory, its windows boarded up, graffiti covering its walls. Sebastian limped toward it, leaning on his cane, ignoring his driver's concerned protests. Inside, he found a makeshift living space in what must have once been an office. A worn sleeping bag, a backpack containing a few clothes, books borrowed from the library, and a collection of small treasures, colored stones, a toy car, a snow globe with a crack running down one side. Sebastian waited, sitting on a wooden crate. Hours passed before he heard cautious footsteps. The boy appeared in the doorway, freezing when he saw the well-dressed stranger in his home. His clothes were too small and worn thin. His sneakers had holes in them, but his eyes were bright and intelligent, wary but unafraid. "Hello, Liam," Sebastian said quietly. "My name is Sebastian Hale. I believe you saved my life 2 weeks ago." Liam shifted from one foot to the other. "You were in that car, the one that crashed?" "Yes, and you pulled me out before it could catch fire. The paramedics said I wouldn't have survived otherwise." The boy shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done it." "No," Sebastian said firmly. "They wouldn't have. What you did was extraordinary, especially for someone your age." He stood, wincing slightly at the pain in his leg. "I came here because I owe you a debt I can never fully repay. But I'd like to try." Liam looked suspicious now. "What do you mean?" "I want to help you, Liam. You deserve better than this." Sebastian gestured around the dilapidated room. "A home, an education, opportunities." "I don't need charity," Liam interrupted, a flash of pride in his eyes. Sebastian studied the boy with new respect. "It's not charity when someone has earned it, and you've earned far more than I could ever give you." He smiled slightly. "But I'm a businessman, so let's make a deal. What do you want in return for saving my life?" He expected requests for money, for a home, for the security this child had clearly been denied. What he didn't expect was the answer Liam gave after a long moment of thought. "I want you to have dinner with me," the boy said. Sebastian blinked. "Dinner?" Liam nodded, suddenly looking younger, more vulnerable. "I eat alone every night. Just once I want to know what it's like to have a family." The words hit Sebastian with unexpected force. This child who had nothing wasn't asking for material things. He was asking for companionship, for human connection. "I can do that," Sebastian said, his voice rougher than he intended. That evening, Sebastian's driver returned with bags of groceries. In the abandoned office, Sebastian and Liam set up a makeshift dining area, using crates as chairs and a flat piece of wood as a table. Together, they prepared a simple meal on a camping stove Liam used for cooking. Sebastian Hale, who regularly dined at the finest restaurants in the world, sat across from the orphan boy who had saved his life. They ate sandwiches and soup from paper bowls, and Sebastian couldn't remember when food had tasted better. Liam talked excitedly between bites, telling Sebastian about the books he read, how he'd taught himself math from discarded textbooks, how he still went to the public library whenever he could to learn new things. "Why do you stay here?" Sebastian asked. "Why not go back to foster care?" Liam's smile faded. "The last home, they weren't nice people. They were just in it for the money. And the one before that." He shrugged. "It's better here. I'm free. Nobody hurts me." Sebastian felt something shift inside him, a wall crumbling, a coldness thawing. This child had suffered so much, yet remained kind enough to risk his life for a stranger. As the meal ended, Sebastian realized something startling. For the first time in years, he hadn't thought about business, about deals, about money. For a few precious hours, he had simply been present, connecting with another human being. "Thank you for dinner," Liam said, helping to clean up. It was nice not being alone. Sebastian looked at the boy, really looked at him, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Liam," he said carefully, "what would you think about not being alone anymore? Not just for dinner, but permanently?" The boy's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I have a very big house," Sebastian explained, "with more rooms than I know what to do with. One of them could be yours if you wanted." "You mean, live with you?" Liam asked, disbelief in his voice. "Yes. I could become your guardian. You'd have a home, go to school, have everything you need." Liam stared at him, searching for any sign of deception. "Why would you do that?" Sebastian smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Because, Liam, I think you haven't just saved me from a car accident. I think you might have saved me from something much worse, a life of emptiness." The boy's face lit up with hope, quickly followed by uncertainty. "What if it doesn't work out? What if you change your mind?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Sebastian promised. "But I don't think I will change my mind. Some decisions just feel right, and this is one of them." As they left the abandoned building together that night, Sebastian realized that for the first time in decades, he was looking forward to tomorrow, not because of some business deal, but because it would be the start of something new and meaningful. He had come to offer help to a child in need, never expecting that he would be the one receiving the greater gift, a chance to open his heart again after keeping it closed for so long. The morning sun streamed through the massive windows of Sebastian Hale's mansion as Liam stood in the center of his new bedroom, eyes wide with disbelief. The room was bigger than the entire space he'd been living in at the abandoned building. A king-sized bed with plush pillows, a desk with a brand new laptop, bookshelves filled with adventure stories, and a closet full of clothes that actually fit him. "Is this really all for me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sebastian stood in the doorway leaning on his cane. His leg was still healing, but the doctor said he was making good progress. "All yours, though we can change anything you don't like." Liam ran his hand over the soft bedspread. "I've never had a real bed before. In foster care, I just had a mattress on the floor." Something tightened in Sebastian's chest. In the week since he'd brought Liam home, he'd learned more about the boy's difficult past. Parents lost in a house fire when he was 7, bounced between relatives who didn't want him, then foster homes where he was treated as nothing more than a monthly check. Running away seemed like his only option. "Mrs. Reynolds will be here at 9 to help you get settled," Sebastian said, referring to the kind-hearted housekeeper he'd hired specifically because she had experience working with children. "I have some business calls to make, but we can have lunch together if you'd like." Liam nodded eagerly. "Can I explore the house?" "Of course, this is your home now." The words felt strange on Sebastian's tongue. Home. For 20 years, this mansion had been nothing more than a place where he slept between business trips. Now, with Liam's presence, it felt different, alive somehow. Sebastian made his way to his home office, his thoughts interrupted by the ringing of his phone. It was Monica. "The board members are getting restless," she said, without preamble. "They expected you back in the office days ago. Richardson is particularly vocal about the Asian deal needing your attention." Sebastian sighed. "Schedule a video conference for this afternoon and tell Richardson I'm still recovering from nearly dying. The company survived without me for 3 weeks. It can manage a few more days. There's something else, Monica said, her tone shifting. Harold Wilson has been making inquiries about Liam. Sebastian stiffened. Harold Wilson was his oldest friend and the company's chief legal counsel. What kind of inquiries? About the guardianship process. He's concerned about how this will look to the shareholders. A bachelor in his 50s suddenly taking in a random child with a history of running away from foster homes. Liam is not a random child, Sebastian snapped. He saved my life, and my personal decisions are none of the board's business. I understand that, sir, Monica replied carefully. But Harold suggests meeting with him before you make any permanent arrangements. There are legal complexities, potential PR issues. Fine, tell him to come for dinner tonight. He can meet Liam himself. Sebastian hung up, irritation prickling under his skin. He'd expected resistance from the board about his sudden change in priorities, but not this quickly, and not about Liam. He opened his laptop, intending to review some reports before the video conference, when a knock at his office door interrupted him. "Come in," he called. To his surprise, it was Liam, holding a tray with a teapot and cup. Mrs. Reynolds stood behind him, beaming. "The young man insisted on bringing you tea, Mr. Hale," she explained. "Said you looked tired this morning." Liam carefully placed the tray on Sebastian's desk. "Mrs. Reynolds showed me how to make it just right. She says you like it strong with just a little milk." Sebastian stared at the tea, then at Liam's hopeful face. Such a simple gesture, yet no one had done anything like this for him in years. His staff were efficient but impersonal. The women he occasionally dated were more interested in his wealth than his well-being. "Thank you, Liam. This is exactly what I needed." The boy grinned, clearly pleased. "Mrs. Reynolds is going to teach me how to bake cookies later. I've never baked anything before." "Well, I look forward to trying them," Sebastian said, finding himself smiling in return. "By the way, we'll have a guest for dinner tonight. My friend Harold, he's a lawyer who's going to help us with the guardianship paperwork." Liam's smile faltered slightly. "Does that mean I can stay for sure?" "That's the plan. But these things take time to become official." After Liam left with Mrs. Reynolds, Sebastian sipped his tea and realized he'd never fully considered the complications of becoming a guardian. There would be social services evaluations, court appearances, background checks. Given his wealth and influence, he could expedite the process, but it would still take time. And what about Liam's education? The boy was bright, but had gaps in his learning from missing so much school. There were medical checkups to schedule, therapy to consider. A child who had experienced such trauma would need support beyond what Sebastian alone could provide. The afternoon passed quickly with back-to-back video meetings. Sebastian found himself unusually distracted, his thoughts returning to Liam. Was the boy adjusting okay? Did he feel welcome? Was this enormous house overwhelming after living in such confined spaces? By the time Harold Wilson arrived for dinner, Sebastian had spoken with 3 educational consultants about private tutoring and 2 child psychologists recommended by the hospital. Harold was a tall, distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He'd been Sebastian's father's lawyer before becoming Sebastian's, and there were few people in the world Sebastian trusted more with business matters. "You look better than I expected," Harold said as they walked toward the dining room. "When I heard about the accident, I feared the worst." "I was lucky," Sebastian replied. "If not for Liam, I wouldn't be here at all." Harold's expression grew serious. "Yes, about the boy. You'll meet him in a moment. I want you to get to know him before we discuss anything." The dining room had been transformed. Instead of the formal setting Sebastian was accustomed to, the table had colorful placemats, and in the center stood a slightly lopsided chocolate cake with "Welcome Home, Sebastian" written in wobbly blue frosting. Liam stood nervously beside, Mrs. Reynolds wearing a button-up shirt and khakis that were a stark contrast to the ragged clothes he'd worn just a week ago. "We made cake," he announced. "Mrs. Reynolds helped with the oven part, but I did the frosting myself." Sebastian felt something warm spread through his chest. "It looks delicious." Harold studied the boy with interest as introductions were made. Throughout dinner, he asked Liam questions about his interests, his reading habits, the subjects he liked in school before he'd stopped attending. Liam answered politely, though Sebastian noticed how the boy's eyes occasionally darted toward him, seeking reassurance. "Would it be all right if Sebastian and I talked alone for a while?" Harold finally asked. "Boring lawyer stuff, I'm afraid." Liam nodded, helping Mrs. Reynolds clear the table before heading upstairs to his room. In Sebastian's study, Harold accepted a glass of brandy and got straight to the point. "He seems like a good kid, bright, polite. But Sebastian, have you really thought this through?" "I know it's sudden. It's not just sudden. It's a complete departure from everything I know about you. For 20 years, you've lived for nothing but the company. No serious relationships, no interest in family life. And now overnight you want to become responsible for a child?" Sebastian swirled the brandy in his glass. "The accident changed things, made me see what was missing. Near-death experiences often create temporary shifts in perspective," Harold said carefully. "But those feelings fade. What happens when you're back to working 80-hour weeks and traveling constantly? Who raises the boy then? Housekeepers and nannies?" The question stung because there was truth in it. "I'm making changes at the company, delegating more, restructuring my role." Harold's eyebrows shot up. "You're stepping back from Hale Industries? The board will have a collective heart attack." "I'm not stepping back, just reprioritizing." "Because of a child you met 2 weeks ago?" Harold shook his head. "Sebastian, I've known you since you were younger than Liam. You're my godson and I care about you. But this feels impulsive, and impulsive decisions rarely end well." Sebastian set his glass down with a sharp click. "You think I should send him back to foster care, to people who see him as nothing but a paycheck? He's been through enough, Harold. There are other options. You could set up a trust for him, ensure he's placed with a good family, pay for the best schools." "He needs more than money," Sebastian interrupted. "He needs stability, someone who cares about him." "And you believe that person is you?" Harold asked skeptically. "A lifelong workaholic with no experience raising children?" Sebastian was about to deliver a sharp retort when a small sound from the doorway caught his attention. Liam stood there, his face pale, clearly having heard at least part of the conversation. "I'm sorry," the boy said quickly, backing away. "I just wanted to say goodnight." "Liam, wait," Sebastian called, but the boy had already disappeared down the hallway. Harold looked regretful. "I didn't mean for him to hear that. He's had enough people in his life tell him he's unwanted," Sebastian said, standing up despite the pain in his leg. "I won't be another one." He found Liam sitting on the floor of his new bedroom, knees pulled up to his chest, looking small against the backdrop of luxury. "I can go back," the boy said before Sebastian could speak. "I know I don't belong here." Sebastian lowered himself to sit beside Liam, wincing as his injured leg protested. "Harold is worried about me, not you. He thinks I don't know what I'm doing." "Maybe he's right. He's not," Sebastian said firmly. "Look at me, Liam." He waited until the boy raised his eyes. "Do you know what I was thinking about when my car went off that road? Nothing. No one. I had created a life so empty that in what I thought were my final moments, there wasn't a single person I wanted to say goodbye to." Liam listened intently, his eyes wide. "Then you showed up. This brave kid who risked his own safety to help a stranger. And since that night, I've felt more alive than I have in 20 years. Sebastian placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "So no, Harold isn't right. This isn't a whim or a guilt-driven impulse. This is me recognizing something important when I see it. But I don't know how to be part of a family," Liam admitted softly. "What if I mess up?" "I don't know how to be part of a family anymore either," Sebastian confessed. "My parents died when I was in college. I've been alone ever since. We'll both probably mess up sometimes, but we'll figure it out together. That's what families do." The tension in Liam's small shoulders eased slightly. "Promise you won't change your mind?" "I promise." Sebastian held out his hand, pinky extended. "Pinky swear," which I'm told is the most serious kind of promise. A smile broke through Liam's worry as he linked his pinky with Sebastian's. "It is. You can't ever break it." "Then I'm bound for life." Later that night, after getting Liam settled and saying goodbye to a still skeptical Harold, Sebastian sat in his office reviewing the financial arrangements he'd begun making for Liam's future. Trust funds, education accounts, adjustments to his will, practical matters he could control. His phone buzzed with a text from Harold. The background checks on the boy's previous foster families came back. "You should see this. Calling you tomorrow." Sebastian frowned. He hadn't asked Harold to run background checks. What had his friend discovered? The next morning brought clear skies and a fresh complication. As Sebastian and Liam ate breakfast on the terrace, Mrs. Reynolds appeared with a worried expression. "There's a woman at the front gate, Mr. Hale. She says she's Liam's aunt, and she has the police with her." Liam's spoon clattered against his bowl. "I don't have an aunt." Sebastian's protective instincts flared immediately. "Stay here with Mrs. Reynolds, I'll handle this." At the front gate, he found a stern-faced woman in her 40s standing beside a police officer. She introduced herself as Diana Carter, sister of Liam's father. "I've been searching for my nephew for months," she said, her voice breaking with what appeared to be emotion. "When I saw the news story about the accident and recognized him as the boy who saved you, I couldn't believe it. I've been trying to find him since his parents died." The police officer looked uncomfortable but determined. "Mr. Hale, I understand. You've been housing the minor, but Ms. Carter has documentation showing she's his next of kin. She has legal priority as a blood relative." Sebastian studied the woman carefully. Something felt off. "If you've been looking for him all this time, why are you only appearing now?" "I've been living overseas," she replied smoothly. "Military family. We move around a lot. By the time I found out what happened to my brother and his wife, Liam had already entered the foster system. The paperwork to find him and establish guardianship has been a nightmare." Her story sounded plausible, but Sebastian had spent decades reading people across negotiating tables. Diana Carter's concern didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll need to verify your identity and claims before Liam goes anywhere," Sebastian said, firmly. "He's been through enough trauma." "Of course," she agreed too quickly, "but I'd like to see him now. He's my nephew, after all." Before Sebastian could respond, his phone rang. It was Harold. "Don't let anyone take the boy," Harold said without preamble. "The foster care records were falsified. Someone's been monitoring Liam since his parents' death, and that fire wasn't an accident. I'm on my way with court papers and the FBI." Sebastian's blood ran cold as the pieces clicked into place. Diana Carter wasn't here out of family concern. She wanted Liam. But why? "Officer," Sebastian said calmly, slipping his phone back into his pocket, "I'd like to see Ms. Carter's identification, please. And I'll need to make some calls to verify her story before anyone sees Liam." Diana's friendly demeanor slipped for just a moment, revealing something harder beneath. "This is unnecessary. I have all the paperwork right here." The police officer, sensing the tension, looked between them uncertainly. From inside the house, Sebastian heard Mrs. Reynolds calling his name, her voice urgent. He turned to see her running toward the gate, breathless. "Mr. Hale, Liam's gone. He climbed out his window when he heard about his aunt. He left a note saying he didn't want to cause you any more trouble." Sebastian's heart dropped. Somewhere out there, a frightened 10-year-old was running away again, not because he wanted to, but because he thought it would protect the first person who had shown him real kindness in years. "Officer," Sebastian said, his voice deadly calm, as he turned back to Diana Carter, "I believe this woman is involved in something criminal related to Liam's parents' deaths. My lawyer is on his way with federal agents. I suggest you detain her until they arrive." Diana's face contorted with rage as she realized her plan was falling apart. "You have no idea what you're getting involved in, Hale." "Maybe not," Sebastian replied, already moving toward his car. "But I know exactly who I'm fighting for." As the officer cautiously approached Diana, Sebastian had only one thought: find Liam before whoever Diana was working for did. Because now, it was clear, the boy hadn't just randomly been in the woods the night of the accident. He'd been hiding there, running from something, or someone. And whatever danger had been stalking Liam all this time had just caught up with both of them. Rain pounded the city streets as Sebastian drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Mrs. Reynolds had found Liam's note tucked under his pillow. "I don't want to cause more problems." "You've been so nice to me, but it's better if I go. Thank you for everything." Those simple words tore at Sebastian's heart. The boy had spent his life being shuffled from one place to another. Always the one who had to leave. Always the one who had to adapt. Now, when faced with conflict, his instinct was to remove himself from the equation. Where would he go? Sebastian muttered to himself, scanning the streets as he drove. The abandoned building where Liam had been living. Too obvious if someone was looking for him. The library he loved. Closed at this hour. Sebastian's phone rang. Harold's name flashed on the screen. "The FBI has detained Diana Carter," Harold said. "Immediately. She's not talking, but they found fake identification documents in her possession. She's definitely not Liam's aunt." "Did they find out who she's working for?" "Not yet, but they're investigating possible connections to someone named Victor Blackwell. Does that name mean anything to you?" Sebastian frowned. "No. Should it?" "I'm not sure. He's a real estate developer with some questionable business practices. No obvious connection to Liam or his parents, but the FBI seems very interested in him." "Keep digging," Sebastian said. "I need to find Liam before whoever sent that woman does." He ended the call and tried to think like a scared 10-year-old. Where would Liam feel safe? The answer came to him suddenly: the hospital. The night they had dinner at the abandoned building, Liam had mentioned feeling safe at St. Luke's Hospital. The staff had been kind to him when he'd snuck in to read to elderly patients who had no visitors. Sebastian made a sharp U-turn, heading toward the hospital. The pain in his leg was getting worse, but he ignored it. Nothing mattered except finding Liam. At St. Luke's, the night staff recognized Sebastian immediately. The Hale family had funded the hospital's new children's wing 5 years ago. "I'm looking for a boy named Liam," Sebastian explained to the night supervisor. 10 years old, brown hair, probably scared. He might have come here seeking shelter. The woman shook her head. "I haven't seen any child like that tonight, Mr. Hale, but I just started my shift an hour ago." Sebastian's heart sank. He was about to leave when a young orderly spoke up. "Wait, there was a kid in the reading room earlier. I thought he was with one of the patient's families." The reading room was a small library on the second floor, donated by Sebastian's mother years ago. When he pushed open the door, the room appeared empty at first glance. Rows of bookshelves, comfortable chairs, tables with reading lamps. Then he noticed a small shape curled up in the corner behind, the largest armchair. Liam was asleep using his backpack as a pillow, a book about space exploration clutched to his chest. His face was streaked with dried tears, and Sebastian felt a sharp pang of guilt. This child had been through so much, and now he was sleeping on a hospital floor because he thought he was protecting Sebastian. "Liam," Sebastian said softly, kneeling beside the boy despite the protest from his injured leg. "Liam, wake up, it's me." The boy's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition, then fear. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, sitting up. "I didn't know where else to go. It's okay, you're safe now." Sebastian reached out, and to his surprise, Liam threw his arms around him, burying his face against Sebastian's shoulder. "I heard that lady saying she was my aunt," Liam said, his voice muffled. "I don't have an aunt. I was scared she'd take me away." Sebastian held him tightly. "No one is taking you anywhere, I promise." "But who was she? Why did she lie?" Sebastian chose his words carefully. "We're not sure yet, but Harold is working with the police to find out. The important thing is that you're safe." He helped Liam to his feet, keeping a steadying hand on the boy's shoulder. "Let's go home." The drive back was quiet, Liam staring out the window at the rain-slicked streets. When they reached the mansion's gates, Sebastian was relieved to see the police were gone. Mrs. Reynolds was waiting anxiously in the foyer. "Thank heavens," she exclaimed, wrapping Liam in a hug. "You gave us such a fright, young man." "I'm sorry," Liam said again, looking exhausted. "No more apologies needed," Sebastian assured him. "But next time you're worried about something, talk to me first, okay? We're in this together now." After getting Liam settled back in his room, Sebastian met with the security team he'd called in. The mansion's security system was being upgraded, additional guards stationed around the perimeter. Whatever was happening, whoever wanted to find Liam, they'd have to get through substantial defenses now. Harold arrived just after midnight, looking grim. The FBI questioned Diana Carter for hours. She finally cracked when they threatened her with kidnapping charges. Sebastian led him into the study, closing the door so Liam wouldn't overhear if he woke up. What did she say? She works for Victor Blackwell, as we suspected. But here's where it gets interesting. Liam's father, Robert Carter, was an accountant at Blackwell Developments before he died. Sebastian frowned. The fire that killed Liam's parents was definitely not an accident, Harold confirmed. The FBI has reopened the investigation. Their working theory is that Robert Carter discovered something incriminating in Blackwell's financial records, something worth killing for. But why come after Liam now? He was just a child when it happened. Harold's expression grew even more serious, because of something Robert Carter did before he died. Apparently, he suspected he was in danger. He hid evidence somewhere, evidence that could bring down Blackwell's entire operation. The FBI believes he may have told Liam where it is. Sebastian sank into his chair. Does Liam know any of this? That's what we need to find out, Harold said. Diana Carter confessed that Blackwell has been keeping tabs on Liam through the foster care system, waiting for him to lead them to whatever his father hid. When Liam ran away, they lost track of him. Then that news story about the accident put him back on their radar. The implications were staggering. Had Liam been hiding in those woods near the crash site because he was still running from Blackwell's people? Was it mere coincidence that Sebastian's car had gone off the road there? Or had someone tampered with it, knowing he'd be driving that route? We need to talk to Liam, Sebastian decided. In the morning, when he's rested, if he knows something, even if he doesn't realize its significance. Harold nodded. The FBI wants to interview him too, but I insisted they wait. He trusts you. He might not even know he has information. The next morning, Sebastian found himself uncharacteristically nervous as he waited for Liam to come down. For breakfast. How did you ask a child if he knew about evidence his father had hidden just before being murdered? Liam appeared in the dining room doorway, still in his pajamas, his hair tousled from sleep. Despite everything, Sebastian smiled at the sight. 2 weeks ago, this boy had been living in an abandoned building. Now he looked like any normal kid on a Saturday morning. Did you sleep okay? Sebastian asked as Liam took a seat at the table. The boy nodded, reaching for the orange juice. Better than at the hospital. Sebastian hesitated, then decided directness was best. Liam, there's something important we need to talk about. It's about your parents. Liam's hand stilled, the juice glass halfway to his lips. What about them? The police have been looking into what happened to them. The fire. They don't think it was an accident. The boy set down his glass carefully, his eyes downcast. Tanessa? Sebastian exchanged a startled look with Harold, who had just entered the room. You know, Liam nodded. Dad told me. The night before the fire, he came to my room. He said some bad people might try to hurt us, and if anything happened, I should hide his special box. Sebastian's heart raced. Did he tell you what was in the box? Papers. He said they were proof that Mr. Blackwell was stealing money and hurting people. Liam's voice grew quieter. He made me memorize where to find it if something happened to him and Mom. Harold stepped forward. Liam, this is incredibly important. Do you know where this box is now? The boy looked up, his eyes suddenly fearful. That's why those people have been following me, isn't it? They want Dad's box. Sebastian moved to Liam's side, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Yes, but they won't get it. You're safe here. But what if they hurt you too? Liam asked, his voice breaking. Like they hurt my parents. The raw fear in the boy's voice tore at Sebastian's heart. That's not going to happen. We have security and the FBI is involved now. The people who hurt your parents will be arrested. But only if we can find the evidence, Harold added gently. The proof your father hid. Liam bit his lip, thinking. It's in a safety deposit box at Midwest National Bank. Dad gave me the key the night before the fire. I've kept it with me ever since. Sebastian remembered the small treasures in Liam's makeshift home, the toy car, the snow globe. Is the key with your things? Liam nodded. It's inside my snow globe. You have to break it to get the key out. Dad said only to do that if I found someone I could really trust. The implications of what Liam was saying weren't lost on Sebastian. This boy had been carrying the key to his parents' killer's downfall for 3 years, keeping it safe, waiting for someone he could trust. "You don't have to break it yet," Sebastian assured him. "We'll go to the bank together with the FBI. They can help us access the deposit box legally." Harold was already on his phone calling his FBI contact. Within hours, a plan was in motion. The snow globe, with the key still safely inside, was handed over to FBI agents. They would access the safety deposit box, retrieve Robert Carter's evidence, and build their case against Victor Blackwell. But Sebastian knew the danger wasn't over yet. As long as Blackwell remained free, Liam was a target. "We're going to take a little trip," Sebastian told Liam that evening as they sat in the library. "Just until this situation is resolved." "Where are we going?" Liam asked, looking up from his book. "I have a house on a private island in the Caribbean. Very few people know about it. We'll be safe there, and you'll love the beach." Liam's eyes lit up momentarily, then dimmed. "But what about your work? You have that important company." Sebastian smiled, touched by the boy's concern. "I have excellent people who can run things while I'm away. Right now, you're my priority." The next morning, as they prepared to leave for the airport, Sebastian received an urgent call from Harold. The FBI raided Blackwell's offices last night. The evidence from the deposit box was exactly what they needed. Detailed records of money, laundering, bribery, even connections to 2 other deaths besides Liam's parents. "Did they arrest Blackwell?" Sebastian asked, watching as Liam helped Mrs. Reynolds pack snacks for the flight. "That's the problem," Harold said grimly. "He wasn't there. They think he was tipped off. Sebastian, he's on the run and he knows." "Liam is with you." Sebastian's grip tightened on the phone. "We're leaving for the airport in 20 minutes, private jet, maximum security. I've already arranged for FBI agents to escort you," Harold replied. "But be careful. Blackwell has nothing to lose now." As Sebastian hung up, he noticed Liam watching him, concern in his young eyes. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Sebastian assured him, forcing a smile. "Just some last-minute arrangements." The drive to the private airfield was tense, their car flanked by FBI vehicles. Sebastian kept scanning the roads, looking for any sign of trouble. They were almost there when he noticed a black SUV, closing in from behind, moving too fast. "Hold on," he warned Liam, just as the SUV rammed into their back bumper. The driver, a former military man Sebastian had hired specifically for his defensive driving skills, executed a perfect evasive maneuver, but the SUV kept coming. Through the tinted windows, Sebastian could make out the driver's cold, determined expression. Victor Blackwell had found them. The FBI vehicles moved to intercept, but Blackwell's SUV swerved around them, pulling alongside Sebastian's car. Sebastian pushed Liam down in the seat, shielding him with his own body as the window beside them shattered. "Get us to the airfield," Sebastian ordered the driver, his arm still protectively around Liam. The next few minutes were chaos. Screeching tires shouted commands from FBI agents, the sound of gunfire. Sebastian kept Liam covered, feeling the boy trembling beneath him. "It's going to be okay," he whispered, praying he was right. When the car finally skidded to a stop at the airfield, Sebastian looked up to see FBI agents surrounding a crashed SUV. Victor Blackwell was being handcuffed, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, his face contorted with rage as he was led away. "Is it over?" Liam asked in a small voice as Sebastian helped him out of the car. An FBI agent approached them, holstering her weapon. "We got him, Mr. Hale. Blackwell won't be hurting anyone else. You and the boy are safe now." Relief washed over Sebastian. As he knelt in front of Liam, checking him for injuries. "Are you hurt?" Liam shook his head, his eyes wide but remarkably calm. "I knew you'd protect me." The simple faith in those words hit Sebastian with unexpected force. This child, who had lost so much, who had every reason to distrust adults, had placed his complete trust in Sebastian. It was a responsibility Sebastian had never asked for, never expected, but now couldn't imagine living without. "Always," Sebastian promised, pulling Liam into a hug. "That's what family does." They still boarded the private jet, deciding the Caribbean. Vacation was well-deserved after everything they'd been through. As the plane took off, Sebastian watched Liam pressing his face against the window, marveling at the view of clouds and sky. "I've never been on a plane before," the boy admitted, his earlier fear replaced by excitement. Sebastian smiled. There are going to be a lot of firsts for both of us. 2 weeks later, they returned to a different world. Victor Blackwell was in federal custody, his criminal empire dismantled. The FBI had uncovered evidence that cleared Liam's name from any lingering suspicion in the foster care system, paving the way for Sebastian's guardianship to become permanent. The legal proceedings moved quickly, expedited by Harold's connections and Sebastian's resources. On a bright spring morning, they stood before a family court judge, Sebastian's hand resting supportively on Liam's shoulder. The court has reviewed all the evidence and finds that permanent guardianship with Mr. Sebastian Hale is in the best interest of the minor Liam Carter, the judge announced. Mr. Hale, do you understand the responsibilities you're taking on? Sebastian looked down at Liam, who was trying hard to maintain a serious expression despite the smile threatening to break through. I do, Your Honor. And Liam, the judge continued, his tone gentler. Are you comfortable with this arrangement? Liam nodded vigorously. Yes, sir, very comfortable. A ripple of laughter went through the courtroom, breaking the formality of the moment. Then, by the power vested in me, I hereby grant permanent guardianship of Liam Carter to Sebastian Hale. The judge smiled. Congratulations to you both. Outside the courthouse, photographers captured the moment, Sebastian and Liam walking down the steps, both smiling, a new family created from the most unexpected circumstances. So what happens now? Liam asked as they got into the car. Sebastian contemplated the question. His life had changed so completely in the past month that sometimes it felt like a dream. The workaholic CEO who lived only for his company had been replaced by a man who now measured success differently, by the happiness of the child beside him, by the meaningful connections he was building, by the future they would shape together. Now, Sebastian said, we live our lives. You'll go to school, make friends, learn and grow. I'll work, but not too much. We'll have dinner together every night, not just once. We'll travel, explore, figure things out as we go. Like a real family, Liam said softly. Sebastian nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Exactly like a real family, because that's what we are now. As they drove home, truly home, not just a house, but a place filled with meaning and connection, Sebastian reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. Her car accident that should have ended his life had instead given him a new one. A boy who had saved him from the wreckage had also saved him from a future of empty achievement and lonely success. What had started with an unbelievable request, I want you to have dinner with me, had become so much more. It had become a second chance for both of them, a family built not from obligation or blood, but from choice and love. And as Sebastian glanced at Liam, happily pointing out something through the car window, he knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. He'd found what he didn't even know he was looking for, a son, a purpose, a home that went beyond four walls. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many, they would face them together. 1 year later, the morning sun filtered through the curtains of Liam's bedroom as his alarm clock buzzed. He groaned and pulled the pillow over his head, much like any normal 11-year-old faced with the prospect of Monday morning. Rise and shine, Sebastian called, knocking on the door before pushing it open. First day of 6th grade. You don't want to be late. Liam emerged from under the pillow, his hair sticking up in all directions. 5 more minutes? Sebastian laughed, setting a glass of orange juice on the nightstand. Not today, buddy. Mrs. Reynolds already has breakfast ready, and Harold is stopping by before school to wish you luck. With a dramatic sigh that only pre-teens can perfect, Liam rolled out of bed. His room had transformed over the past year, walls now covered with space posters, shelves filled with books and science kits, a telescope by the window, and photos everywhere. Photos of him and Sebastian fishing, hiking at baseball games. Photos of his birthday party with new friends from the neighborhood. Photos of Mrs. Reynolds teaching him how to make pancakes, evidence of a normal, happy life. As Liam got dressed, in his new school uniform, Sebastian checked his own appearance in the hallway mirror. At 53, he looked younger than he had a year ago. The permanent stress lines around his eyes had softened. His hair had a bit more gray at the temples, but there was color in his face and a lightness in his movements that had been missing before. "Do you think the other kids will like me?" Liam asked as they sat at the breakfast table, his voice trying for casual but betraying his nervousness. Sebastian buttered a piece of toast thoughtfully. "They'd be crazy not to. You're smart, funny, and you have more baseball stats memorized than any kid I've ever met. But what if they find out about, you know, everything with my parents and Mr. Blackwell? It was in all the newspapers." The trial of Victor Blackwell had been major news for months. Sebastian had done his best to shield Liam from the worst of it, but they'd agreed from the beginning to be honest with each other. Liam knew Blackwell had been sentenced to life in prison for the murders of his parents and 2 others. "Kids your age don't read newspapers," Sebastian assured him. "And if anyone does say anything, just remember what we talked about. Your past is part of who you are, but it doesn't define your future." Mrs. Reynolds placed a plate of scrambled eggs in front of Liam. "And if anyone gives you trouble, you tell them your grandmother will come after them with a wooden spoon." Liam grinned at the older woman who had, over the past year, become the closest thing to a grandmother he'd ever known. "Thanks, Mrs. R." The doorbell rang, announcing Harold's arrival. The lawyer had become a regular visitor and something of an uncle figure to Liam. Today he carried a gift-wrapped package. "For the scholar on his first day," Harold said, handing it to Liam with a wink. Inside was a sleek, engraved pen set. "Every important person needs a good pen," Harold explained. "Your dad here has been using the same one to sign million-dollar deals for 20 years. Liam's eyes widened at the casual way Harold referred to Sebastian as his dad. It wasn't official. The guardianship papers listed Sebastian as Liam's legal guardian, but over the past few months the lines had blurred. They hadn't discussed formal adoption yet, but Sebastian had been thinking about it more and more. The drive to Westridge Academy was filled with Liam's excited chatter about his new school. Sebastian had researched extensively before enrolling. Him, looking for a place that would challenge Liam academically, while providing the emotional support he needed. Westridge had a strong academic program, but also emphasized community and personal growth. "Remember, I'll pick you up at 3, Sebastian said, as they pulled up to the impressive brick building. Other parents were dropping off their children, some looking as nervous as Liam felt. "You don't have to," Liam protested. "You have that big meeting today. I can take the bus." Sebastian shook his head. "The meeting can wait. First day of school is important." The truth was, Sebastian had restructured his entire life over the past year. He'd promoted Monica to COO, delegated most day-to-day operations, and rarely worked past 6 in the evening. Hale Industries was still thriving. In fact, their stock was up, but Sebastian's priorities had shifted dramatically. "Okay," Liam agreed, looking secretly pleased. He gathered his backpack, then hesitated. "What if I'm not smart enough for this school?" Sebastian placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Liam, you taught yourself algebra from discarded textbooks while living in an abandoned building. You're going to be just fine." With a nod and a quick hug, Liam joined the stream of students heading into the school. Sebastian watched until he disappeared through the doors, feeling the familiar mix of pride and worry that he now recognized as a permanent part of parenthood. Back at home, Sebastian settled into his home office for a video conference with the board. The quarterly report showed record profits, largely due to the Asian markets Sebastian had been focusing on before the accident. "The numbers are excellent," Richardson, the finance director, admitted grudgingly. A year ago, he'd been one of the most vocal opponents of Sebastian's stepped-back role. "Whatever you're doing these days, Hale, it's working." "I delegate more and micromanage less," Sebastian replied simply. "Turns out people perform better when you trust them to do their jobs." After the meeting, Sebastian found himself with an unexpected free hour before his next commitment. He wandered into Liam's room, smiling at the organized chaos so typical of the boy, a half-finished science project on the desk, comic books stacked beside classic novels, the baseball mitt Sebastian had given him for his birthday placed carefully on the shelf. On the bedside table sat a framed photo Sebastian hadn't seen before. It showed Liam's parents, a smiling couple in their 30s, the man with Liam's same earnest expression, the woman with his warm brown eyes. Beside it was a newer photo of Sebastian and Liam at the beach during their Caribbean vacation. Past and present, side by side. not competing, but complementing each other. Sebastian's phone rang, Monica calling about an unexpected issue with a supplier. He handled it quickly, giving clear directions and trusting her to manage the details. 1 year ago, he would have dropped everything and gone to the office himself. Now, he knew the company wouldn't fall apart without his constant presence. 3 o'clock sharp, Sebastian was waiting outside Westridge Academy. He spotted Liam immediately, walking with a group of boys, all talking animatedly. When Liam saw the car, he said goodbye to his new friends and jogged over, his face split in a wide grin. "Good day?" Sebastian asked as Liam climbed in. "The best. My science teacher used to work for NASA, and we're going to build rockets later this semester. And I got invited to try out for the math team." As Liam chatted about his day, Sebastian felt a wave of gratitude so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. This happy, thriving child was a far cry from the scared boy he'd found in an abandoned building a year ago. They stopped for ice cream on the way home, a tradition they'd established for celebrating milestones. Sitting across from each other in the small ice cream parlor, Sebastian realized he had something important to discuss. "Liam, there's something I've been thinking about," he began, suddenly nervous in a way board meetings never made him feel. "You know I'm your legal guardian now." Liam nodded, spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "But I've been wondering if you might want something more permanent." Sebastian took a deep breath. "I've been talking to Harold about adoption. If that's something you'd be interested in." Liam's spoon clattered against the dish. "You want to adopt me, like officially?" "Only if you want that too," Sebastian hastened to add. "It wouldn't change anything about our day-to-day life. It would just make you legally my son in every way." "What? About my name?" Liam asked, his voice small. Sebastian hadn't expected that question. "That would be entirely up to you. You could keep Carter to honor your parents, or you could be Liam Carter Hale or Liam Hale, whatever feels right to you." Liam was quiet for a long moment, stirring his melting ice cream. "I think my parents would want me to be happy," he finally said. "And having a dad again would make me really happy." "So that's a yes?" Sebastian asked, his heart pounding. Liam's smile was answer enough, but he added, "Definitely, yes." That evening, they shared the news with Mrs. Reynolds, who cried happy tears and immediately started planning a celebration. Harold promised to start the paperwork first thing in the morning, his usual professional demeanor cracking to reveal genuine joy for both of them. Later, as Sebastian tucked Liam into bed, a routine they'd established early on, despite Liam's occasional protests that he was too old for it, the boy asked a question that caught Sebastian off guard. "Do you ever think about that night when my car crashed?" Sebastian sat on the edge of the bed. "Often. It changed everything." "Do you ever wonder why I was there?" "In those woods, I mean." Sebastian had wondered, especially after learning about Blackwell's pursuit of Liam. "I assumed you were hiding, keeping away from the foster system." Liam shook his head. "I was there because of the dreams." "Dreams?" "After my parents died, I started having these dreams where a voice told me to go to those woods, that I needed to be there on that specific night." Liam looked embarrassed. "It sounds crazy, but the voice sounded like my dad. I'd been having the dream for weeks, getting more urgent each time. So finally I went." Sebastian felt a chill run down his spine. "And that was the night of the accident." Liam nodded. "Sometimes I think maybe my parents were watching over me, making sure I found you, making sure I wasn't alone anymore." Sebastian wasn't a spiritual man. His world had always been grounded in measurable facts and tangible assets, but looking at Liam's earnest face, he couldn't dismiss the possibility that something greater than coincidence had brought them together. "Maybe they were," Sebastian said softly. "And I'm grateful every day, because finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me." "Even better than making your first million?" Liam teased, lightening the moment. Sebastian laughed. "Much better. Money can't buy what matters most." The adoption process moved smoothly, expedited by Harold's expertise and Sebastian's resources. 3 months later, on a crisp fall day, they stood before the same judge who had granted the guardianship. "By the power vested in me, I hereby declare Liam Carter Hale, the legally adopted son of Sebastian Hale," the judge announced with a warm smile. Congratulations to you both." The courtroom erupted in applause, Mrs. Reynolds dabbing at her eyes, Harold beaming proudly, Monica and several of Sebastian's colleagues showing their support. Even some of Liam's teachers and new friends from Westridge had come to witness the occasion. Outside on the courthouse steps, as photographers once again captured the moment for the society pages, Sebastian knelt to be at eye level with his son. "Well, Mr. Hale," he said, straightening Liam's tie, "how does it feel to make it official?" Liam's smile was radiant. "Like I finally found where I belong." "Me too, son," Sebastian replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Me too." That evening, they hosted a small celebration at the mansion, now truly a home, filled with warmth and laughter that had been missing for decades. As Sebastian watched Liam entertaining guests with his enthusiastic description of the rocket he was building for science class, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had led them here. A car accident, a brave boy, an unbelievable request for dinner. Harold approached, handing Sebastian a glass of champagne. "You look happy, old friend. It suits you." "I am happy," Sebastian admitted. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "You know," Harold said thoughtfully, "I was wrong. That night when I questioned your decision to take Liam in, I thought it was an impulsive reaction to a near-death experience. And now? Now I think it was the first truly wise decision you've ever made." Harold smiled. "The company is thriving with you working less. You're healthier than you've been in years. And that boy," he nodded toward Liam, who was now showing Mrs. Reynolds his latest card trick, "is flourishing. You've given him a home, but he's given you something just as valuable. A family," Sebastian said simply. "Exactly. And speaking of family," Harold added, checking his watch, "I believe you have a tradition to uphold." Sebastian nodded, moving to the center of the room and calling for everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us today. But if you'll excuse us, Liam and I have a standing appointment for dinner, just the two of us." Understanding smiles and warm farewells followed as the guests departed. Soon the mansion was quiet, just Sebastian and Liam sitting at the small table in the kitchen nook, the same table where they'd shared their first breakfast together a year ago. "We didn't have to send everyone away," Liam said, though he looked pleased by the private time. "Oh yes, we did," Sebastian countered, serving them both from the dishes Mrs. Reynolds had prepared before leaving. "1 year ago today, a very brave boy asked me to have dinner with him. It's an anniversary worth honoring." Liam's eyes widened. "You remembered the exact date?" "I remember everything about that night," Sebastian said softly. "How could I forget the moment my life truly began?" They ate together, father and son talking about Liam's upcoming science fair, Sebastian's plans to take a proper vacation over Christmas, the baseball game they would attend that weekend. Normal family conversation, precious in its ordinariness. After dinner, as they sat together on the terrace watching the stars come out, Liam grew contemplative. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that night?" he asked. "If I hadn't been in those woods? Or if someone else had found you after the crash?" Sebastian considered the question. "I think about who I was before. Always. Working, always focused on the next deal, the next acquisition. I had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. And now I have you," Sebastian said simply. "And that has made all the difference." Liam leaned against Sebastian's shoulder, comfortable in the way children are when they feel completely secure. "I'm glad I found you that night." "Me too, son," Sebastian replied, putting his arm around the boy's shoulders. "Me too." As they sat together under the vast canopy of stars, Sebastian thought about the strange, beautiful journey that had brought them to this moment. A car accident that should have ended his life had instead given him a new one. A child who had pulled him from the wreckage had also pulled him from a lonely existence of wealth without meaning. And it had all begun with a simple, unbelievable request. "I want you to have dinner with me." Sometimes, Sebastian reflected, the smallest requests led to the greatest gifts, and sometimes family was found in the most unexpected places, not in shared blood, but in shared moments, shared meals, shared lives built choice by choice, day by day. Sebastian Hale had spent his life building an empire of steel and glass, but his greatest achievement turned out to be something far more precious: a home where a once lonely boy and a once lonely man had found in each other exactly what they needed: a place to belong, a person to love, a family to call their own at the end.